Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, may you direct us so to read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest your holy word, that we may be transformed by you, O Christ. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Welcome back. And I welcome myself back to this wonderful fellowship. You guys just pressed on exactly as you should, with probably more fun in my absence, it seems, but we're going to have fun tonight. And it's great to be together again. And if John Tuthill would please read for us chapter 32, we will break it down.
Very good. So these three men stopped answering Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. But Elihu, son of Barachel, the Buzite, of the family of Ram, became very angry with Job for justifying himself rather than God. He was also angry with the three friends because they had found no way to refute Job, and yet had condemned him. Now Elihu had waited before speaking to Job because they were older than he. But when he saw that the three men had nothing more to say, his anger was aroused. So Elihu, son of Barachel, the Buzite, said, I am young in years, and you are old. That is why I was fearful, not daring to tell you what I know. I thought age should speak, advanced years should teach wisdom. But it is the Spirit in a man, the breath of the Almighty, that gives him understanding. It is not only the old who are wise, not only the aged who understand what is right. Therefore I say, listen to me, I too will tell you what I know. I waited while you spoke. I listened to your reasoning. While you were searching for words, I gave you my full attention. But not one of you has proved Job wrong. None of you has answered his arguments. Do not say, we have found wisdom. Let God refute him, not man. But Job has not marshaled his words against me, and I will not answer him with your arguments. They are dismayed and have no more to say. Words have failed them. Must I wait now that they are silent, now that they stand there with no reply? I too will have my say. I too will tell what I know. For I am full of words, and the spirit within me compels me. Inside I am like a bottled up wine, just like new wineskins ready to burst. I must speak and find relief. I must open my lips and reply. I will show partiality to no one, nor will I flatter any man. For if I were skilled in flattery, my makers would soon take me away.
Thank you, John. Here, Elihu is presented. He is the son of Barachel the Buzite, a descendant of Abraham's nephew Buz. His name means, quote, he is my God. And this was a name that endured for many generations among Israelite families and appears elsewhere in the Bible. For example, 1 Samuel 1:1, you see that name. He will give 4 speeches over the next 6 chapters where he will attempt to explain the character of God. Now, what's different from Elihu's approach compared to Job's other 3 friends is that while they tried to prove that Job was guilty of unconfessed sin, he will try to show that Job had a wrong view of God. So this is going to be a very doctrinal journey as we go through these chapters with Elihu. And we have some interesting things to see about him, both his imperfection, but also some really great points he makes about the sovereignty of God. We'll have a lot of fun with this. And if Vito would read a quote for us, which will introduce us to this section, we'll take it from there.
Elihu opens up the theme of wisdom, which is a theological bridge in the story between Job's experience and his hearing the Lord. This will prove to be the theological significance of Elihu, but there's perhaps a dramatic purpose as well. These chapters give us a space between Job and Yahweh. They illustrate just by being there that Yahweh is not forced into a quick reply by the intensity of Job's entreaties. God acts in his own time. He is not a human beck and call. He comes down his own secret stair, and in sovereign and gracious care, he decides the timing of his interventions. Elihu gives us this place to pause, and so serves the author's purpose of displaying the freedom of God. Elihu blusters away. He makes his own mistakes. But in the middle of his blustering, there are some gems. And it is these gems which are part of the preparation Job needs, and we the readers need, to be ready to hear the Lord.
Thank you, Vito. So this is a holy pause here in this book, between everything that's happened prior to now and the point where Job starts to hear from God. So by way of review, as we look back at the previous 31 chapters, what are some things that we've learned that have brought us to this point?
Well, Job doesn't believe he did anything wrong to deserve but the trials and tribulations that he got.
And he's lost everything except for his wife.
There was no, like, it kind of popped up a couple of times, there was no, like, bridge, or there's, like, Job, and then there's, like, God, but there's always those things that kind of come out to say, I mean, there was no Jesus to kind of act as kind of that connection,
That advocate.
that advocate.
I think also Job came to the conclusion that he was going to eventually rise from the dead. Where he said, in my own flesh I'll see God at a latter day. I think it was chapter 19.
Yes, we saw some what might be called messianic verses in the previous portions, which would come at times of great despair, and then suddenly even we reading it would rise up in hope for Job, that there was this knowledge that seemed surprising that he would have, and there he would utter it. What about his friends? What did we learn or say about the friends? The three friends before Elihu, the fourth person.
Well, they were older men. They were probably businessmen that he knew from business. They were scattered from different parts of the known world at the time.
And they believe he did something. He must have done something wrong.
They were basically using the party line approach of divine retribution. I mean, that was their whole view of things, I think.
Okay, and what had Job done, and what was his defense initially about keeping himself right before God? Blameless.
Sacrifices. He would make these ritualistic sacrifices in advance, just in case his children had sinned. He would do these as a transaction. It's, just in case, I'll do these sacrifices.
Preventive maintenance.
Little preemptive strike, yeah. Like a party cleanup after their parties.
But he also had a high opinion of his own sacrifices.
Oh, yeah.
He thought that what he was doing, he was basically earning good points with God.
Talk about the party cleanup, I was thinking about like teenagers, right? They figure if they clean it up, nobody will. Parents are gone, they have a party, they clean it up, nobody will find out, but they do, right?
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
Job does.
We had some good discussions about the merits, but also the mistakes of the three friends and their approaches. And let's talk about that some. What were some of the right and helpful things, even if they were hurtful for Job to hear? What were some of the compelling aspects to the three friends' approach?
I like they deferred to him when they came and they didn't say anything until he did for even a number of days. That was a good start.
They believe that he sinned, and the fact that God would forgive his sins if only he admitted that he sinned. But he didn't think he did anything wrong. But they told him that, listen, you did something wrong, admit you did it wrong, say you're sorry, and God will forgive you. That he didn't go by that.
What did we learn about the approaches that were perhaps not helpful based on how we might minister to each other today in similar circumstances?
Not helpful to
tell your suffering friend that he must have done something wrong.
Yeah.
Also, they're even making up stories about him that weren't true. They're saying that he did horrible things to people that could have easily been proven, but they weren't there.
Yeah, one was even a vision. Eliphaz had a vision.
Okay, so we have verse 1 from chapter 32. So these three men quit answering Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. So we're this far along in Job, and Job is righteous in his own eyes. I noticed, John, you made the point that the sacrifices were made for his children.
Yeah.
So he was righteous in his own eyes and was trying to make atonement, if you will, for others. But I think what we're learning here is that Job still had a lot to learn, right? As do we. And so on the scene comes Elihu. Now, he's younger, so what does this mean? Why does he come forth?
He sees that everybody else, the elders have all spoken. They're done, and Job is done. So he says, I can't stand it anymore. I have to say this.
Would it be fair to say that in his mind they failed?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It also might be there again, if he's the younger one, almost like, I'm not saying innovation, he's like looking at things objectively. You have these two old timers, you have Job at one side, and you have these three guys in the other that are the old times that are kind of maybe looking at things a certain way type of thing, and he can come in with being a younger person, maybe looking at things objectively. And maybe he's going to be the catalyst to bring this other piece along that God's trying to do.
So he will try to help Job find the right view of God.
Right.
And Elihu says something interesting in verse 8. It says, but it is the spirit in a man, the breath of the Almighty that gives him understanding. So it's like the Holy Spirit is working through Elihu. And a very, probably one of the first times in Scripture, in this time frame, that someone brings out the Holy Spirit as if it's a
Reminds
wind.
me of King David when he was chosen among his brothers last, and the point was made that man looks on the outer form, but God looks at the heart. And it was the Spirit of the Lord that was in David that gave him the anointing to be the leader he was. And so here's a young person saying something similar, as you said, Larry, but it is the Spirit in man and the breath of the Almighty that give him understanding. It is not only the old who are wise, or the elderly who understand how to judge. So what is it about youth that is a strength spiritually? We can speak from our own experience, as we've either been young, are young, know people who are young. You know, it can go either way, right?
Yeah.
I think it's that fresh insight. It's you see something that looks very obvious because you're young, you've not seen it before, and you're like, yeah. Goodbye.
Oh my God, I didn't want to interrupt the whole thing. I brought something biblical with me today.
Have a seat. We're in mid-discussion, so have a seat.
All right.
But the other thing here is that
Cleanse me of hyssop, and I shall be pure. Is that what it says? Okay.
the other thing here is he's ready to explode. He just can't
Yeah.
contain it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's right there. I've heard enough. You know.
But sometimes in youth, that impetuous feeling could be the youth, or the lack of experience that might bring wisdom. But you're right. You know, sometimes experience clouds situations because you try to manipulate, but it's a good combination.
But he has like a sure and certain knowledge, you know, like Larry said, the breath of the Almighty gives understanding. That's where I'm getting this from. And Job had a glimmer of that where he said, I know my Redeemer lives. So they both have like this, they know things, and they're confident of it.
I think of when Paul wrote to Timothy and said, do not let anybody despise you because of your youth. So the New Testament example was, age doesn't matter, it's the call of God. And yet there is something to the fact that experience lends itself to certain perspectives, but George, as you put it, you know, sometimes when you're new in the faith, you can see things so clearly with newness of belief and eyes to see that it can be helpful. That's part of why we encourage our youth to be leading this church in so many ways, in concert with the experience we have. But there's a part of Elihu's disposition which is unique to him. What is that?
He's got confidence, but I mean, it seems like he's, he let everybody say their piece type of thing, but it does seem like he's got an element of self-assuredness to himself.
He's going to be brutally honest, too. He says, I'm not going to flatter anybody.
He's frustrated too, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, frustrated with the three friends who keep accusing Job, but they can't prove anything. It's just hearsay.
He's chomping at the bit.
It is.
He's been waiting a long time. Verse 11, look, I waited for your conclusions. I listened to your insights as you sought for words. I paid close attention to you, yet no one proved Job wrong. Not one of you refuted his arguments. So do not claim we have found wisdom, let God deal with him, not man. But Job has not directed his argument to me, and I will not respond to him with your arguments. So he's going to take a different approach, isn't he? Again, they were out to say that Job was guilty of unconfessed sin. He's going to say, let me teach you doctrine, Job.
I was reading somewhere in Psalms, and it alluded, I don't know if it said this in the exact words, but it said words are drawn swords. And I think, the Spirit, the Word of God is the sword of the Spirit. And so he seems to have that. He wants to wield it.
The prophet Jeremiah described the word of God as like fire in his bones, and he could not speak it. He had to get it out. And I think of verse 18, for I am full of words, and my spirit compels me to speak. It's about to burst like new wineskins, my heart. So it's like you can't contain it.
What was his name? You said earlier what his name meant?
His name means he is my God.
I mean, that tells you something.
Yes.
Great name.
A descendant of Abraham's nephew Booz. So he comes from quite a line of spiritual leaders. I think we can learn a lot from his passion, though, when he describes it like this: my heart is like unvented wine. It is about to burst like new wineskins. I must speak so that I can find relief. I must open my lips and respond. So like a lot of prophets in the Bible, he could not speak. Even if it were to be troublesome or get someone upset, he would do it.
And yet he also did have the ability, enough self-restraint to hold his tongue until his elders
Yes.
spoke,
Yeah.
which suggests a certain practiced wisdom. He may be chomping at the bit. There's something really wonderful about this impetuous wisdom of young people. Their willingness, and it's almost not a willingness. It is a compulsion. I hear that this compulsion to just get out there and say this. My gosh, don't you people say it?
Yeah.
But he's got the fruit of the Spirit, self-control. Maybe he thought they wouldn't listen to him if he spoke too soon. Maybe they thought they would discount him or say, sit down.
I think it's interesting too is that later on in the book, Elihu is the only one that God does not rebuke. Everybody else gets basically taken out to the woodshed by God.
Spoilers.
You've read
You've read ahead.
Spark notes.
I got two Bibles.
He's been reading Job for Dummies, which I need to read. Well, that's actually very helpful because it tells us that there's a righteousness about this young man. Even though he's angry and you might say he's overdoing it, no, he is in step with the Spirit, you can say. For I do not know how to give such titles, otherwise my Maker would remove me in an instant. So he's partial to no one. He's going to speak it as it is. All right, so 4 speeches over 6 chapters. And are we ready to jump into chapter 33? George.
But now, Job, listen to my words. Pay attention to everything I say. I am about to open my mouth. My words are on the tip of my tongue. My words come from an upright heart. My lips sincerely speak what I know. The Spirit of God has made me. The breath of the Almighty gives me life. Answer me then if you can. Prepare yourself and confront me. I am not like you before God. I am just like you before God. I too have been taken from clay. No fear of me should harm you, nor should my hand be heavy upon you. But you have said in my hearing, I heard the very words, I am pure and without sin. I am clean and free from guilt. Yet God has found fault with me. He considers me his enemy. He fastens my feet in shackles. He keeps close watch on all my paths. But I tell you, in this you are not right, for God is greater than man. Why do you complain to him that he answers none of man's words? For God does speak, now one way, now another, though man may not perceive it. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on men as they slumber in their beds, he may speak in their ears and terrify them with warnings, to turn man from wrongdoing and keep him from pride, to preserve his soul from the pit, his life from the perishing by the sword. Or a man may be chastened on a bed of pain with constant distress in his bones, so that his very being finds food repulsive and his soul loathes the choicest meal. His flesh wastes away to nothing, and his bones once hidden now stick out. His soul draws near to the pit, and his life to the messengers of death. Yet if there is an angel on his side as a mediator, 1 out of 1,000 to tell a man what is right for him, to be gracious to him and say, spare him from going down to the pit. I have found a ransom for him. And then his flesh is renewed like a child's. It is restored as in the days of his youth. He prays to God and finds favor with him. He sees God's face and shouts for joy. He is restored by God to his righteous state. Then he comes to men and says, I have sinned and perverted what was right, but I did not get what I deserved. He redeemed my soul from going down to the pit, and I will live to enjoy the light. God does all these things to a man, twice, even 3 times, to turn back his soul from the pit, that the light of life may shine on him. Pay attention, Job, and listen to me. Be silent, and I will speak. If you have anything to say, answer me. Speak up, for I want you to be clear. But if not, then listen to me, be silent, and I will teach you wisdom.
Thank you. There's a lot in there. What are your thoughts and reflections?
Well, the thing that came out, stuck out to me the most was that we found a ransom. What did they say?
That word ransom.
A ransom, yeah. I have found a ransom for him. Spare him from going down the pit, I found a ransom for him. To me, that's Jesus Christ. He ransomed, his blood ransomed us.
So we've heard the word mediator
Yeah.
previously, and tonight we have that word ransom.
And again, mediator too. If there is an angel on his side as a mediator. His flesh is renewed like a child's and restored in the days of his youth.
What does that mean about the flesh being renewed?
Born again.
So
Like
we,
before the fall, maybe. Yeah.
pardon me?
With the flesh, you were saying, what was the meaning of that? Maybe that it was restored from what was supposed to be before the fall?
Remember that cryptic reference to Adam
Yeah.
a couple of weeks before we ended, where it really pointed back to the fact that there'd be a redemption of the fall. So that's an interesting perspective. Yeah. Peter, I'm sorry. So the progression of this chapter is God speaks through dreams and visions. We'll go through each of these. Suffering, and an angel or mediator. So let's start with dreams and visions. What does that mean, that God speaks through dreams and visions? Well, that's biblical, right?
Yeah.
Can you think of some figures that have been spoken to in dreams?
Yeah.
Many.
Joseph.
Yeah, Mary too.
And it involved an angel. Hail, O favored one, the Lord is with you.
No.
Yeah, here the dream is one of awakening to one's sinfulness. Terrifies them with warnings that he may turn them aside from their deeds and keep them from pride. Quite a nightmare.
It's more like Pilate's wife's dream, right?
Yeah.
But I think the dreams and the visions, kind of interesting, if you kind of look at the last chapter, and you say, okay, you have Job's and his friends and Job. They've gone around through multiple rounds, kind of one prosecuting the other one defending himself, no resolution. So now we have this young Elihu come in, okay, and he's got all the stuff ready to burst out type of thing, he's harnessed in. So now he's almost saying, okay, you guys have been talking back and forth. Now here's the new approach, and kind of almost introducing the dreams, the multiple. I think he even said here something about no matter whether you go down once, twice, or three times, there's always that chance to, that you're going to get some help.
I think these verses are very powerful. But I tell you that you are wrong in this matter. Since God is greater than man, why do you take him to court for not answering anything a person asks? For God speaks time and again, but a person may not notice it. We see that all the time today, right? God didn't answer my prayer, or God doesn't talk to me. Where is God? These are questions that are not uncommon.
Well, we walk sightless on miracles like the rabbinical prayer. We don't see it, it's in front of us though.
Yeah.
Very interesting technique here. So Elihu kind of says, "Hey Job, come on, I'm just like you. We're both made from clay." And then he starts that through verse. That's kind of through verse 7. And then he starts in, and it's almost as though he's saying in verse 9 that you're so overwhelmed with your feeling of your own righteousness. How could this happen to me? That he's not actually seeing that there may be something prideful in that. And he says this. He says this somewhat, he basically says, look, you say I am clean without transgression, and then he starts talking about human nature. He comes back at Job somewhat indirecectly. I just like the way he's approaching Job. Hey, we're like, we're both guys. And then you're saying, okay, this shouldn't have happened to me. I'm righteous. Well, but human nature is such. And then he goes on. And you're clearly tormented. So what's that all about?
Who is that guy? He's pretty good.
That's good in evangelism too. You talk to people about their sin, but you need to make clear, I'm a wicked, desperately horrible person also. I'm not telling you I'm better than you.
I like this technique. It's
yeah.
good style.
We've come back to that point in our discussions about Job. Blameless, perhaps, but what's really going on inside of it? Is it pride? that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, why are we still in this discussion? Why is God still waiting?
I think like 99% of the population feel like disrespected if they are spoken to the wrong way or something like that. So maybe it's got that going on. I don't know.
I think 10 through 12, or, yeah, I think it's 10 through 12, it's kind of interesting because it almost brings in this thing that even bad things happen to good people. And it doesn't necessarily mean you've done wrong type of thing. It's really the overwhelming power of God, which it said there in, yet God is greater than any mortal. So, I mean, I think to kind of follow what Steve was saying is I think it brings that into play.
Well, that, in 8 there, he's refuting, refuting what Job said as far as, I'm pure without sin, I'm clean and free from guilt, yet God has found fault. So he's complaining again. Job, in his words, he's repeating a Job's words. And he says, well, I'm telling you, you're not right, for God is greater than man. And why do you complain to him that he answers no one man's words? And he goes on to say that God speaks on and on. So he's saying, Job, you're wrong. He didn't shackle you. You're not his enemy. There's another reason why God's doing this to you. And it may be maybe it's a warning. It says over here, in here it says, pain is a warning. Elihu did not defend Job as innocent, but his arguments shifted the emphasis of suffering from punishment to warning. Perhaps he suggested God allows a man to suffer in order to turn back his soul from the pit. Primarily, however, Elihu defended God's actions. Is it unthinkable that God would do wrong, that the Almighty would pervert justice? So he's saying, God did nothing wrong. You must have done it. He's doing this to you for a reason that Job does not understand yet.
Thanks, Vito. And as Elihu crafts this theological lesson for Job, one thing I believe I hear you saying that we're seeing is that God doesn't owe us any answers. So Job's whole approach, in a sense, is wrong. It's a bit of a shift, isn't it? So if we look at dreams and visions, we've touched on that a bit, and then suffering, he uncovers the areas at that time and terrifies them with warnings in order to turn a person from his actions and suppress his pride. As C.S. Lewis put it, pain is God's megaphone to a deaf world. God spares his soul from the pit, his life from crossing the river of death. A person may be disciplined on his bed with pain and constant distress in his bones, so that he detests bread and his soul despises his favorite food. His flesh wastes away to nothing, and his unseen bones stick out. He draws near the pit, and his life to the executioners. Okay, well, Job living that, right? How do you think he's taking all this from Elihu, this young whippersnapper?
Who are you?
He's probably not used to being spoken to like this at all, ever. He's a man of position and, great wealth, and just this, and especially from this guy, this young guy. Can't be taking it well.
So is Job, is Elihu, is that how I say it? Elihu saying that, Job, you're looking for an answer on your terms.
Yeah.
God's speaking to you, you just aren't picking it up. 'Cause it's on his terms.
Different frequency.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it goes on to say that he has 1 out of 1,000 has an angel to interpret or what was that?
Verse verse 23?
Yeah,
If there's an angel on his side, one mediator out of
mediator.
1,000 to
A
tell a
mediator.
person what is right for him.
yeah, mediator, or this Bible says interpreter.
Well, let's look at some biblical accounts of where we saw an angel serve as essentially a mediator or interpreter. How about Abraham's sacrifice by it? What happened? Just as he was about to plunge the knife
Good thing you listened.
Abraham,
in. An
stop.
angel. An angel, right? We just heard 2 weeks ago about Moses in the burning bush. There was an angel. Jacob wrestling with an angel.
The angels and the 3 wise men, that was it. How are the wise men? Were they warned by an angel too? Or no?
Saw a star rising.
Star rising.
But the angels were very much present at the incarnation. Okay, so angels have played different roles. They've been messengers of information, but they've also been mediating figures in that sense. We could say pointing to the ultimate mediator and advocate. In fact, Ray, I have a reading for you. 1 Timothy 2:5, please. Let me get that.
For there is one God and one mediator between God and mankind, the man Christ Jesus, who gave himself as a ransom for all people.
So that verse sums up ransom, mediator, advocate, everything that we're looking at in this book of Job when it comes up with titles such as these. So Elihu saw this angel not only as a mediating force, but also as a ransom for sinners. That's interesting. Let's go through that. So verse 23. If there is an angel on his side, one mediator out of 1,000 to tell a person what is right for him, and to be gracious to him and say, spare him from going down to the pit, I have found a ransom. I mean, that's pretty clear, isn't it?
Yeah, we have someone who gives us a ransom. He paid a ransom for us. He died on a cross for us.
What verse?
Yeah.
24. Does anybody have a translation Sheol instead of the pit?
No, that's just fair.
Yeah.
King James says pit.
Then his flesh will be healthier than in his youth, and he will return to the days of his youthful vigor. So I've heard you already say that this points to new creation, resurrected life, even pre-fall paradise, right? He will pray to God, and God will delight in him. That man will behold his face with a shout of joy, and God will restore his righteousness to him. This is powerful. As we've looked at these different, what we might call messianic verses in Job, what are some of the attributes of this mediator or this figure? What kind of things will this person deliver? We just heard some very specific things in this chapter. Can you remember some other things from past verses? Larry, you touched on it earlier. In my flesh, I will see God.
That's what I was just looking for.
Who is my friend and not a stranger. Every time we have a burial service, we process behind the cross, and the opening sentences are read from Job, those words. Very powerful. I love that, my friend and not a stranger. Friend of sinners. So verse 27, he will look at men and say, I've sinned and perverted what was right, yet I did not get what I deserved. How about the thieves on the cross? Surely we are getting what we justly deserve. This man's done nothing wrong. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. This day I tell you, you'll be with me in paradise. He redeemed my soul from going down to the pit, and I will continue to see the light. I am the light of the world. Those who follow me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of everlasting life, said Jesus. Verse 29, God certainly does all these things 2 or 3 times to a man in order to turn him back from the pit, so he may shine with the light of life.
It's almost like God is talking through Elihu, and you're giving him an answer for why this is happening to him.
Oh, he actually used it 3 times like baseball, then you're out.
A lot of times God gives you hundreds of...
This Sunday we were about 70 times 7, so it's multiply actually.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty clear when you kind of read through this stuff, it really, it's forecasting or whatever about Jesus coming, which is probably whatever, 1,000 years later. So is there anything between Job and the New Testament? I mean, I know there's probably prophets and everything else like that, but, you know, it's almost like this kind of pretty well articulates what's going to happen. But there seems like a big gap, you know what I'm saying?
Well, you have prophets that will come along.
Yeah, did we talk about how that Job being very, likely being very old? So even deep in the Hebrew psyche is an understanding. God has planted this understanding of redemption, and it's being manifest even in this ancient book, in this ancient story.
Is it exempt, what's the word, extant? Is it still understood that way in Jewish philosophy and religion now?
Jews have a different name for Job, do they not? It's
You've got it tonight.
yeah. Well, some view it as pre-Hebrew,
Yeah.
even before the Hebrew scriptures. But the point is, yes, what happened after Job till Jesus? A lot.
Yeah.
Like Isaiah, who described the suffering servant with great detail. Psalm 22, which Jesus fulfilled his prophecy on the day of his death. There's a lot. And in fairness to this, we see this through what we call high Christology, that this is through Jesus that this makes sense. Others, though, would read it and not agree, in all fairness to the whole discussion. Perhaps people who are not Christian or who don't want to see it for whatever reason, don't believe it, they would not make the connections. But we find it quite connected, don't we?
It seems naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So verse 31, pay attention, Job, and listen to me. Be quiet, and I will speak. But if you have something to say, answer me. Speak, for I would like to justify you. If not, then listen to me. Be quiet, and I will teach you wisdom. Well, he is teaching wisdom.
He's giving him a little opportunity. He's saying, speak now or forever hold your peace. I mean, I'm about to tell you, I'm about to lay this down on you, so tell me, if you have something to say now, go ahead, but otherwise, I'm going to watch. It seems to be what he's saying.
So he's warming up.
Yeah.
I don't see that yet.
No?
You
Be silent and I will speak. If you have anything to say, answer me, but speak up, because I want you to be clear. But if not, listen.
Shall we press on to chapter 34?
Sure.
Any final thoughts on 33? Any questions, comments?
Well, just as an overall summary of what I kind of picked up from it is the first 32 chapters was basically Job saying, I didn't sin, and his friends saying, no, you had to sin because of the punishment. So there's talking specifically back and forth and probably past each other about the specific sin that he did or didn't commit. But now this young man is coming back and saying, it's not the specific sin, it's the pride in which you took saying you were sinless. Then, as Steve had said, very methodically goes through and talks about Job in the third party as if we're all in that, under that domain, I guess. And then he obviously refers to that pride and how God continues to come back and speaks to you time after time, then sends the angels and does it multiple times to save you from that pride and final damnation. So this chapter just kind of summarized that whole first part very well.
Yeah, and to take it further from, I've been thinking about this as far as redemption. And at first, Job, it was all about Job, it was all about him. And then with his friends, it was all about him, and we're all about them. And with God, God is redeeming the whole world. God is looking at the world and what happened through sin, through the fall. And we shouldn't take it so personally. And when we take it personally, that's when we seem to in a negative way, take it personally.
Yeah.
Why is this happening to me? It's happening because it's a fallen world and he has to redeem and create a new heaven and a new earth. So it's not about us, and it's not about Job, and it's not about his friends. It's about God redeeming the world. So let's look at it as a bigger picture rather than focusing in on, oh, I feel sorry for Job, his friends are a pain in the ass. It's not, it's about God's total redemption of the world.
For the first time ever, I actually agree with you.
Okay, let's go.
But let me add a caveat. But God knows each individually personally and is willing to go back 2 and 3 and 4 times. So
Well, that's
we can't-
what the cross was all about. Yeah,
That's
I mean,
the point.
yeah.
The redemption is individual, but it's also, right.
Yeah, and
Well
every
done,
time
Ray.
we
Very well done.
whine and moan, look to the cross. I mean, that was not a good day for him.
I think this last 33 actually is kind of interesting, where it says, "If not, listen to me, be silent, and I will teach you wisdom." And this is one of the wisdom books. It's also a thing of a young guy teaching the old guys wisdom. So I think that kind of, it's not meant to be a prophet or anything like that. So I think, to me, it's kind of interesting.
But I like it, he didn't say it's his own wisdom, you know?
No, he didn't say it's-
That was good.
No, he didn't say it was his own.
And Proverbs, as we've looked at before, reminds us that it's the fear of the Lord that is the beginning of wisdom. So we're being brought back by Elihu to the fear of God. Four is a long chapter. And you all wanted to have some discussion before we got into it. That just happened. So anything else you want to connect things to or express? If we talk about wisdom for a moment, what have we learned? If this is a book of wisdom, what have we learned up until this point about God, humanity, suffering?
Suffering is part of life. It's not necessarily a punishment for something, but it is part of the experience of being a human.
So in that story, when Jesus was asked by the disciples regarding the blind man in John 9, who sinned, his man or his parents, and Jesus made the point that it had nothing to do with human sin within a family line. It was so that God would be glorified. Going back to the point being discussed about the fact that it's about God bringing about new creation,
Yes.
ultimately. Right?
I also think it's part of the learning process in a sense. When we suffer, going through certain experiences, it causes our mentality to spread in certain ways, and that causes us to grow in certain ways, and so it's transposable values.
What's the connection between spiritual growth, suffering, and wisdom?
Oh, the more you suffer, the more wisdom you get, the more spiritual growth you have.
Well, is it Romans or Paul says somewhere about suffering, perseverance? Perseverance brings, so it's maturity, it's going through the fire, it's purifying, burning out the sinfulness and pride, and getting us to that next level.
I mean, this book really goes out and starts to articulate some of the fundamental, things like you talked earlier about, talking about, the life after death, the whole thing about the mediators, so there's a lot of really fundamentals, whether it's Christian or even other faiths. I think this was really kind of really starting to articulate for really humankind some of those really kind of fundamentals.
Isn't it interesting in Job 1:8, then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." So the Lord himself says that. And then he's teaching Job through every chapter on top of it. So he says, yes, no, he's my servant. He is blameless, but he's got something to learn. So let's do this.
Right.
Very interesting.
That's the most twisted deal in the Bible. I'm sorry.
Sure, Job doesn't even have the backstory. What if Job knew that the Lord said, yeah, you're blameless and everything, but you know what? I'll slap you up the backside of the head anyway.
So that others may gain wisdom.
Well, obviously it's all the way around, but he's still teaching Job in the midst of this opportunity for Satan to fail. He is, working on Job. He is all of us.
What if it's so twisted that like one person in this room is teached like 4,000 years later or whatever it is? How many years ago was Job? 2,000?
It's sort of a moving target in terms of the actual date, but several thousand.
But obviously that's what the word is for us all to learn and grow.
Yeah, Job himself even says, "Oh, that my words were recorded, that they were written upon a scroll." This is in chapter 19. He's hoping that somebody's writing this stuff down.
I know now that stuff happened to me 30 years ago, but I had no clue why it did today, like in real time. I can't explain it.
Well, the Bible tells us that, time for us is nothing compared to God's view of time. That God is beyond space and time. So, one day is like 1,000 years. God's ways are altogether
My thoughts are not your thoughts.
right.
My edition of the Bible here, which must be right because it was given to me by the church. Has a little footnote.
Why?
A little footnote. It's a list. It says suffering is helpful when, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times that suffering is helpful. When we turn to God for understanding and deliverance, when we ask important questions we might not take time to ask about otherwise, when we're open to being helped by others, and so on. And then the parallel column is suffering is harmful when we become hardened and reject God, when we refuse to ask questions and miss the lessons, we allow it to make us self-centered and selfish, we withdraw from the help others can give, and we accuse God of being unjust and refuse to be open to any changes in our lives. I haven't read all of them, but
That'd be interesting.
that's really interesting, because we're talking about Job's suffering and the ways in which that suffering can be helpful to him and to us.
On the destructive side, it sounds like those are all, if you remain prideful, then that's when the destruction is there. If you're not going to turn for help, if you're not going to...
And if you refuse to accept that the suffering may bring, some good may come out of it.
Yeah, if you don't have faith in that.
Yeah, the irony is Job. He's all going about his suffering, but here we are, whatever, 2,000 or 3,000 years later, there's millions of people are learning and created value out of his story. Right?
I know. But I want to pray for them that they can, they can see that it works together, even though we don't really see it, but that can it work together for the good? And can they help? Can they be shown that? In that, even in the like impossible kind of circumstances.
I think we do the same thing as Job is doing. When you go back in the first paragraph, that God says, "Have you considered my son Job? He's blameless. He has everything done right." And Job is trying to find out whether he did anything wrong. He came to the conclusion that he's right, but he still doesn't understand why this is all happening to him, which tells that he's not trusting God, what he's doing. Even though he knows he did everything right, that he's sinless, he has none in sin, he still does not give God the glory of doing what is right and trusting him.
So that would be a sin, right?
That's the ultimate sin then.
Pride.
But he didn't curse God.
No, he did not. But he still didn't trust him. Because he always comes back to why is it happening? Why is it happening?
Yeah, right before he stops talking, Job has a big long diatribe about how great he is, how he doesn't do any of these things that are wrong.
It would be an interesting study to talk about Job being blameless, because David was a man after God's own heart, yet he sinned, but worshipped and loved the Lord. So God isn't measuring us in our sinfulness. I mean, everyone who was a great prophet or man in the Old Testament all sinned and had their problems. And so I don't know if he is referring that he was sinless. He was blameless because of maybe the blood of Christ, as we're blameless through the blood of Christ.
It's a gift.
But it doesn't mean that we're sinless. But
And I don't remember Job saying, I've done stuff wrong, so I came back to the Lord. It was always about his family or his kids. So he's always interceding for them, but he never says yeah, I do stuff wrong too. He always says, I have a great life and I'm rich and I have everything because I'm perfect and I don't do anything wrong.
Well,
so he just doesn't see exactly what we're talking here, that the fact that alone is a sin right there.
And he may be, and it sounds like he is a pretty good guy. I'm glad you brought up this verse, brought us back to the beginning, Ken. He may be a pretty good guy, but I look at my own life, and there's just a big difference between, being a good guy in an okay world and completely submitting myself to God's will, regardless of what shows up. That begins to get us to the Lord.
And Jesus says, he says the standard is be perfect. Be perfect as my Heavenly Father is perfect in Matthew 5. So that's the standard. And so it depends what you're putting your life against. If you're putting your life against the world and you may look okay, like you're saying, you might look a pretty good guy. If you have I've seen if you have a sheep that's standing out in a field and he might look pretty white, but if it snows, then you see like the sheep is really pretty grungy. So it depends what you're contrasting against,
I think Job's pretty self-centered. When you look at early in the chapter, his kids get murdered or get killed. Now, did they get killed to punish him, or did they get killed for something they do? He never raises that question, So it's all about him and not really looking at maybe the bigger picture and maybe challenging things.
That was a good point, that his kids were killed. It's like, you're punishing me by killing my children.
Right.
It's like taking away his
He's still alive.
Yeah.
He may have a few inconveniences, but
the thing we have to keep remembering is pretty much the first half of the book was all about him in mourning. So not only did he lose his family, but he lost all his wealth, and he lost his health, and he sores all over his body. So his outcry, although he never cursed God, his outcry was in a mournful way. This is happening to me. Why is it? We would all go through that.
Yes.
So I don't know if he's necessarily prideful in going through that thought process of how, why, where, and, I don't know.
I think
Certainly
he's-
Job was not.
I think he's working through it. He just
Yeah,
like,
it's a mourning.
But when he concluded speaking, he said, "My harp is tuned to mourning and my flute to the sound of wailing." It's like, I'm done. That's my final.
why was I
Say-
born? Right?
Yeah.
Cursed that I was born.
That's why I say good day now instead of good morning. Because I don't feel like crying all day long. Got it? Or no?
I'll ask you later. Yeah.
It's 8 o'clock.
Wait for the book.
We should say hello to Lou Sanabria, who has been with us the whole hour,
All right, Lou.
and he has to be counted in the attendance.
Yes, Lou, good to know you're out there.
That's right. Let us pray. Lord, we are very grateful to be back together, gathered, studying the Word. And we are reminded, as Paul wrote to the Romans, that we rejoice in our afflictions because we know that affliction produces endurance, endurance produces character, and character produces hope. Lord, we hope in you, Jesus, as the resurrection and the life in all of our sufferings. May you give us your joy. Amen.
Amen.
So next week we'll pick up with chapter 34 with Harlan.
Hallelujah.